Hello and welcome. This is Lisa Jones, and you are listening to the Exploring Death podcast. Hello and welcome to the Exploring Death podcast. Today, I have a very special guest, Mike Ergo. He served as an infantryman in the U.S. Marine Corps from 2001 to 2005. He is a licensed clinical social worker in the VA system. In his spare time, he races Ironman triathlons with the names of his fallen Marines on his jersey and carries a flag to honor a local Gold Star family, helping them to know their loved ones are not forgotten and never gone, and that we carry them in our hearts forever. He connects to gratitude each day through his children and loving wife. Hi, Mike. Thanks for joining me today.
Lisa, thank you so much for having me on. I've been looking forward to this, and this is really fun to finally talk to you.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I am thrilled. You reached out to me recently, and I was just blown away by your story and how, here you are, military man that's super connected, a Marine, no less. And you have this amazing story that really woke you up to life. And I would love for you to share with our listeners what unfolded that fateful day.
I will, yeah. Well, and I think starting out too, when I wrote you over the weekend, and this is the perfect time. This was meant to be at this time because I connect through grief. It's like my portal to a really profound, limitless joy. And this last week I had to say goodbye to my friend, Jose, my dog that I got right after I got out of the Marine Corps. And I remember you talking about how talking about grief with other people is one thing, and then experiencing it in your life is something completely different. And so it's been a heavy week, but I've been smiling through a lot of tears, and it's been just a way for me to reconnect to source. And I've had a connection to that since 2004. And when I was deployed in Iraq, and we were in the city of Fallujah, and there was this major urban battle. And I guess we can get right into it and start talking about that if you'd like.
Yeah, I'd love for you to share that with us.
So I was in an infantry unit, and I had already lost a really good friend to an IED, improvised explosive device, a few months prior to that battle. And this is November 2004, and we're fighting house to house in a city of about 250,000 people. Most of the civilians have been evacuated. And the gist of it was, my job as an infantryman was to go from north to south with my fellow Marines, and basically kick open or open every single door in the city and try to kill the people who are waiting inside to kill us. And so it was very intense, and it was everything and more that I trained for and thought war would be. The stakes couldn't be higher. And this one particular day, one of my Marines, I was in charge of 3 Marines, we're a team of 4, and he saw a couple of insurgents hiding right in the courtyard of a building we were in. And we essentially chased them and looking for them from house to house because they were setting up to ambush my platoon. And we were just alone. It was the 4 of us clearing houses that were 2 and 3 stories. And as far as urban combat goes, this is not ideal. You want at least a platoon of people doing this. But it wasn't to be. So we finally went to the very last house they could be in before it was the last place they could have been hiding. And we didn't find these guys in this house. And we were about to check the backyard of this house. It was a 2-story house, and it had a walled-in compound, a yard. And we're about to go into the backyard to check. And my point man opens a small door across the hallway from us. And this is a small bathroom, and it's about, it's just a really small area. And he opens the door and starts yelling, and all of a sudden it was just gunshots were firing at people that were a couple feet away from us, and they were firing back at us. And a couple of my Marines were in the stairs behind me coming down, and the room got darker. It was already dark, and it got smoky from all the gunfire. And at one point I heard one of my guys behind me get hit in the helmet and fall. I heard one of them fall down. He got shot in the helmet, and another one of them, Marines, started yelling in the back. So I was assuming they were, at least one of them was dead. And as I started feeling bullets in between my point man and I, were both pushing against each other because we were trapped and didn't know which way to go. I remember feeling kind of singes on my neck, and I remember feeling, this is it. And for a second, there was a regret of not being able to spend more time with my girlfriend, who's now my wife. And just regret of the people I loved. And I said, you know what? There was an instant in my mind where I said, these men I'm here with, I love deeply. And if this is the way I go out, there's no better way to go out. And I had this just connection, and I surrendered right at that moment. And the best I can describe it is that all of a sudden, instead of living in my head, which I had done up until that point in my life, and my body was just an extension that I controlled from my head, I was my entire body. I was every single cell, and I could see outside of all of them. I could see out of my toes. I could feel the hair growing, literally growing out of my body. And time was no more. I was suddenly, this distinction between my body and the rest of the world started to dissolve as I felt myself start to expand to include the Marines with me. The men we were trying to kill and fight against became me, and I was them. The concrete in the building, things that I didn't perceive to be alive, were all of a sudden all part of one big thing, and it expanded out into infinity. It just kept going. There was no limit. And so there was no more duality. There was no me and them. It was everything. And there was no more time. Everything was. And I felt the most profound sense of peace. And I just knew that, oh, everything is okay. Everything is fine. Everything is okay. And I didn't even perceive, am I dead? Am I alive? I didn't know. It was just, I knew that this was fine. And my experience, my mortal experience of being alive, was a temporary thing, but it wasn't the end. It wasn't the only thing. And so it lasted for an eternity, but it lasted also for only like a millisecond, I guess. At a certain point, I came back in to just my body and found myself there. And I ended up kicking open this door and killing one or two of these men in that room. And we survived. My guys and I survived. And so after that experience, this was, one blip in the middle of over a month of just urban combat fighting and kicking open doors almost every single day. And so there was no time to contemplate what had just happened. Nor, even if there was, I don't think I would have, because it scared me probably so deeply afterwards, because I didn't understand it. It did not fit into my box of how things worked. It didn't fit into anything I could explain. I didn't have the language, vocabulary, and I would just as soon forget it like everything else. And so that led to a lot of suffering and a lot of, I think, heartache, and a lot of just dealing with trauma and dealing with the loss of other friends and survivor's guilt and everything. And when I got back from Iraq, while it was really nice to see my girlfriend, who's now my wife, and reconnect with her, it was one blip or one small little island amongst a big sea of just kind of sorrow and wondering, of being in between, because I felt as though I had left a large part of myself there in Iraq. And I was just here, kind of I was just halfway back, and my spirit felt dead. And I realized for a long time, I thought I fully expected to be dead. And so I wasn't able to plan for anything in the future. And I was just kind of drifting, just kind of blowing like a leaf in the wind. And it wasn't until 2012 where I finished school. I along the way, I'd started to kind of try to deal with some of the sadness and some of the trauma and anxiety. And I knew that the path I was going down since I got back, of being dishonest, breaking the trust of my wife, cheating on her, drinking, using drugs, just being really bitter and angry, I said, either this is the path to death and I'm just going to ride this into the ground, literally. I mean, I was riding around my motorcycle blacked out. I was just hoping something would kill me. It was just complete chaos. And there was my wife and there was my dog, Jose, that were really there for me. And I had some family support that I couldn't really accept. But so 2012, I started to know, I think there's another choice. And when I started to know that, this little tiny kernel in my head appeared, maybe some hope, met by a lot of fear of having to own up to the things I'd done and face these feelings. So I come clean on my wife and I said, look, this is what's happening. And I truly love you, but what I'm trying to do right now, I've been spending a long time just trying to convince people essentially that I'm just a piece of garbage, and that living in that way too and attracting that energy. And I said, look, I've been lying. I know, like this drinking isn't working out. I'm going to stop. I need to stop. And, but if you want to leave, I totally understand. And, she moved out back to her mom's, and she called me that day. She said, look, I'm not going to leave you. I'm going to stay with you, but you have to get your life right. And if you touch one more drop of alcohol or anything else, it's over. And I said, okay. And so there's this intense fear knowing that I would not have my really, I guess, my best friend, alcohol and these substances to numb out all of the pain. And I would have to face the full force of feelings and anxiety, heartache, sadness, anger, and everything that I did not want to deal with. And I said, yeah, I know I will do this. And I loved her more than all that stuff, as scary as it was. And I love myself more than that. And so I through the circles I was in, I became part of a group called Healing the Wounded Heart. And it talked about connecting to our true self and finding where along our life we had checked out and closed our heart. And through that, I learned that I could face my deepest fears of, who I was, like the fear of who I am is not good enough, and the fear of if people really know me, they'll leave. And when I was finally able to face those fears, it did feel like I was dying. It did feel like I was paralyzed with fear, but I went through it, and I realized that underneath numbness and anger and despair and sadness and heartache is just this abundant well of joy. And I tapped into it, and it was powerful. It was just as powerful as that feeling I had in that room in Fallujah, Iraq. And I said, oh, this is it right here. This is it. I don't know what it is, but this is it. And I know I can just take these steps and let my heart be my guiding force. And so I've been doing that since 2012, and it's led me to some really strange places and really, really interesting places, but it's a path where I can see the next step, but I want to know the whole game. I think I want to know the whole path, but that's not how it works. And so it relies on just trusting and acting authentically. And that's really where things started to really take off.
Wow. That is, what a story. And thank you for sharing it. It must be difficult to just go back and access those feelings. I guess, I mean, as you said, you've been working on it for quite a while, but when you came back, did you have like post-traumatic stress disorder or?
Yes, I was diagnosed with a post-traumatic stress disorder, and it was just a confusion of my mind knowing I was back in California where I lived, and my body feeling as if I was about to die. There's just, heart racing and just feeling of dread and cold sweats. And it was really confusing. And so, cannabis was a thing I turned to all the time, and alcohol. And it was so interesting too, because even though I was trying to numb out by using these substances, ingesting cannabis was a way for me to really get deep and actually have to face some of the deeper things that I didn't want to. So my unconscious mind would kind of creep out into consciousness, and I'd have to look at these inconsistencies between my actions and my values. And so that was actually what led to me to be able to stop using drugs and alcohol, where there was really deep experiences in using cannabis. So it was rough though, because even when I got back, I still had friends who were going back for another deployment and stayed in. I had a friend who went back as a security contractor, and he was kidnapped and held captive for close to a year and a half and tortured. And it was ugly stuff. I mean, the captors, cut off his fingers and sent them back to the State Department saying, yes, we have this person. And unless you pay us, we're going to kill him. And ultimately he was killed. And so it was kind of like things kept happening. I kept losing people. But along the way there too, I started to have different dreams that were very real. And one of those dreams was after he was killed, and his name was Josh. And after Josh was killed in 2008, I became friends with his parents, who lived farther up in Northern California. And I had this really intense dream that it was just so vivid and so clear. It was not just a regular kind of blurry dream. And I was sitting there with Josh and his dad, and we were overlooking, a bunch of, looked like redwood and oak trees and these hills that had different stratifications of different colors of red and orange and brown. And there was a body of water beneath it. And for whatever reason, his dad and I and Josh were sitting there and just kind of talking. And out of nowhere, I just asked him, hey, how are you? Are you okay? And he kind of looked back with his just kind of knowing smile. He said, yeah, I'm okay. I'm really good. Things are okay. And I woke up from that, and I was like, I don't know what this is. And I wasn't sure if I could share that with his family, but I just it was, that anxious or this nervous feeling, like this is something I need to do, that fear and excitement that's in your heart. I had that. And eventually I told his parents, look, there's something I need to tell you. And so I sat him down and I told him that. And his dad was crying, and he said, we used to go to Lake Shasta and fish and go on boats there. And we looked at pictures and that's what it looks like. And that was that. And so I was able to, I just chalked it up to, okay, I was able to, give them some peace, and it felt real. But I was still afraid to share this with people and share my experience, my near-death experience, because it was craziness. And as a man and as a Marine and as a combat vet, these are not things we talk about at all. And these are things that, I was worried could get me committed to, an institution if I started talking about them. So I go in between having really profound experiences and experiences of doubt, and this is all just made up, and my mind would talk me out of it. But there's this sadness when my mind would talk me out of it, because I was essentially letting my mind close my heart when that happened. And it goes back even further, because in 2002, before I had even deployed, I had the first dream I can point to where I experienced profound love and connection with another person. And this is a person I didn't know, but I woke up and I remember calling people and talking to a girl I was dating at the time and talking about I have a dream, I have a daughter. And she said, what are you talking about? I said, I know I have a daughter because I had this dream, and it wasn't just a dream, where I connected with her, and I've never felt love like this before. I have never felt love like this before. And I think that was meant to be, because there was many years of suffering and many years where I contemplated suicide and had a gun in my mouth, and we were just thinking about pulling the trigger. And like I told you, ride a motorcycle around blacked out, looking for ways to die. And there was something that kept me from doing it. There was something that just pulled me back from the edge. And when my wife and I when she got pregnant in 2013, I had this knowing. I was like, I'm pretty sure this is going to be a girl. And when my daughter was born, she came into this world in November of 2013. And that was the exact month that my unit took all these heavy losses and everybody was dying. And November for me for many years was just death and loss and hopelessness and ugliness. And all of a sudden it was life and it was celebration. And when I saw my daughter, my firstborn, and I looked at her and her eyes were open and she saw me, it was as if my entire body exploded and overwhelming joy. And I was crying, and I knew I'd be happy, but I didn't think I would experience this just soul shattering kind of moment full of joy, bursting with joy. And I felt that it was like a shockwave just going through me, and my whole body had chills and my whole body was overloaded with this joy. And I knew that when she was holding my finger and looking up at me, I was like, I know you, we've met before. But this is craziness, right? None of it makes sense. It doesn't fit into how I was raised as an evangelical Christian, and it doesn't fit into any kind of thing I can point to. So, you know, all these things are happening, and I see that, where I feel that there's profound purpose and meaning in these things when I just open my heart. If I am willing to go through the fear and I'm willing to go through difficult or unpleasant feelings, I can tap into this. And that willingness has really helped me connect to what I'm doing now through triathlons. And it's been really fun.
Wow. That's just, again, I love the unfolding and the not knowingness, which I think for so many, including myself, being a former analytical person, the CPA in me, you know, questions and wants to doubt this magnificence that flows in unexpectedly. I think that's part of it is, you know, we want to be able to control everything and to be able to know what's next and just like have a plan and go do it. Right. But that's just not the way the mysterious nature of the universe works. And so
it wouldn't be as fun if we just knew the whole plan.
Well, exactly. You know? Right.
There would be no purpose to it, I guess.
Right.
But you know what? I've learned to make friends with the doubt. And I like when I see it, because it's within myself, I can just kind of wave at it and say, that's fine. You're part of me. You can come along too. And that's okay. And a big part of my work and what I do with other vets is help them notice these feelings and say, okay, just because you feel anxiety or sadness, that's okay. You don't have to push that away. You can just allow that to be there while you continue to move towards purpose and what's important to you. And that's made my life a lot easier when I can say, okay, I have doubts. I'm a human being, you know, and I have anger and I have sadness and I have all these things that I'd rather not have if given the choice, but they were there, and accepting that reality is fine. But like you say, like the need to know is still there. And when I had a really pivotal moment in 2014, and what I thought at the time was a coincidence. I'm on the big island of Hawaii, and for vacation with my wife, and you know, I've been without drugs and alcohol for a couple of years, and it's getting to be a little more normal, but I'm finding like, okay, what now? I'm kind of having that feeling of needing to step off and find a direction and connect to purpose. These weren't conscious thoughts, but it was just kind of a feeling inside. And so we were there, and we happened to be there the exact same week of the Ironman World Championships. And I had heard of it. I kind of knew it was a big, really long race that some guy in my dad's office did. And I said, okay, well, I started looking it up on my phone, like, okay, wow. Okay. So they swim 2.4 miles in the ocean without a wetsuit. And then they ride their bikes on a windy highway, you know, in October when the trade winds are there for 112 miles. And then they run a marathon in the heat of the day. And I remember just looking that up really scared me. And why is it scaring at me? Why is it scaring at me? And then, like a lot of combat vets, when we feel fear, it's usually this reaction of anger, because, you know, we were taught from day one in boot camp, no, if you charge through this stuff. And when you, and aggression and anger is actually a tool of the trade. And so I became angry, and I thought, why am I angry? But I found myself like really getting mad at these people. Like, why would you do this? Why would you put your body through? And so luckily and fortunately, I was able to step back at that point and say, the body is having a feeling. What is this feeling? What is this experience? And I said, okay, well, in the past, fear has controlled my life, and fear made me shy away from my heart and purpose and everything, and end up just resenting myself because I didn't say yes and I didn't follow my heart. And so I said, whatever this is, I'm going to lean into this fear, and I'm just going to be there with it and go through it, because I've had that experience with my wife, and I had that experience, you know, with my daughter being born. I said, this is okay. I can be here and allow this fear to be there, and I know it'll lead to growth. And so I just felt this bug and this itch to try out a triathlon. I said, okay, I'll do this. I didn't know why at the time. So I got home from Hawaii and I signed up for a half Ironman. So it's half of all those distances. Still insane in my mind, because it's 70.3 miles long. And I was like, that's still insanity. I couldn't fathom a full Ironman, but I was just barely able to comprehend that a human body could go for 70 miles. So I signed up and I said, okay, well, I'll start training for this thing. And along the way, I was just, I don't know, Ironman, it was sending us inspirational videos to help with our training. And this woman named Lisa Hallett, they sent us a video about her, and she was actually racing that race. And it was a video of her. I remember I was downstairs in my house watching this video on my phone, and Lisa Hallett was from Concord, California, which is right next to where I'm from. And she lost her husband in Afghanistan and was just overcome with grief, you know, and she was just about to give birth to her third child when she found out he was killed. And in her video, she said that I decided that I wasn't just going to sit in this grief anymore. I was going to do something about it. And for her, it was just going outside and running. She said, I don't know why, but I just need to do something, go forward. And the physical way she did it was by moving forward, by running. And eventually she started to find purpose and was able to grieve the loss of her husband through physical activity. And another, you know, soul burst right there. I felt that shockwave of, oh, and I started crying harder than I'd cried in a very long time. And I said, this is beautiful. And this is it. This is it. So that was that huge next step. And then I said, this is what I'm going to do is I'm tired of shying away from the memory of my friends and not being able to connect with them anymore. And I'm tired of that just being a miserable experience when I have to remember them. And I want to be able to tell people about them and celebrate them too. And I knew, because I was like, they're not really gone. None of us are really gone. Maybe we transition somewhere else in the universe, and they're not right in front of us on our face, but they're not gone. We're always here. We're eternal. And so I said, I'm going to put their names on my jersey and race to honor them. And I started doing that. And I remember finishing that first race and being able to tell people about some of my friends on the run. And I said, this feels really good. This feels really good. All this just blockage of grief and all this blockage of anger and guilt and resentment that I felt about not being able to protect some of them from dying started to fade away. And I started to reconnect to their families and say, hey, I'm doing this to honor your sons. I hope that it's okay. I feel like it's something I need to do. And I just want you to know that they're never gone. They're in our hearts forever. And the response I got was just an overwhelming yes and thank you. And it felt good. And it was a win-win. They felt good. I felt good. I could race, and I found a new passion for something. And so I ended up signing up for this full distance Ironman. And I put the reason why I did that at the bottom. And this last question, it's essentially, this is a crazy activity. What's your deal? Why do you do this? And so I put a shorter version of the story in there and said, this is what I do. And Ironman surprised me on a podcast one day and said, I was sharing my story about being in combat with another vet on his podcast. And he had this question that I walked right into. Is great. He said, well, I bet you feel like you could, I bet you wish you could share your work and your story on a bigger stage sometimes and really help, affect change with more people. And I said, yeah, of course I do. But the only bigger thing here is that I'm in World Championships. And I was thinking in my head, this guy doesn't know, I'll have to tell him. And I said, well, I'm a long ways off from being an elite athlete where I can have this time and qualify for this race. So maybe one day. And he said, well, that's funny because I'm telling you today that Ironman is bringing you to race in Kona this year.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
And for people who aren't familiar with triathlon, this is like the World Cup. This is the Super Bowl. This is the World Series of triathlon. It is the dream of people to race this race. Like, it is the most epic start and finish and journey of a race ever in the world. And all of a sudden I was getting the chance to do it that year, my first year of doing a full Ironman and being like a brand new baby in the sport practically. And so I said, yes, of course I'm going to do that. And the journey there, like you're in the islands and just the feeling of profound, I'm not sure what to call it, but I just really feel there's certain places I go where I feel a big presence of something really ancient, something really big, something really wonderful. And I feel that in the islands, and I feel that in the Sierras and a place in the Yuba River where I go to. And I don't know why I feel it, but I feel it.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So tell me, so then you ran the marathon in Kona, right? Give us a little flavor of how that went.
So going into the race, I was just looking at, okay, I'm racing for my fallen friends and for their families. And I'm hoping that I can show people coming back from combat that I'm representing them. This is bigger than me, Mike, running a race. This is me trying to offer people my light, my hope, and what I've tapped into, just the connection of source right there. And so I looked into it, and I read a book by the world's greatest triathlete, Mark Allen, called Fit Soul, Fit Body. And he had a history of being at that race, and he was so good, but that day he could never win. And he would sabotage something, or something would just go wrong, whether it's a flat tire on the bike, or he just would lose energy. And so he connected with a shaman that was from somewhere in Mexico. And this shaman, he happened to just flash in his mind. There was an advertisement for him in one of the Hawaiian magazines of connect to source. And so he sought this guy out, and he found ways to connect to something deeper and make the race about something more than just, swimming, biking, and running. And one of the ways he did that was before the race that he ultimately won and went on to win 6 in a row. He stopped at one of the ancient Hawaiian temples just south of Kona, and the ruins are there. And, he went there and just asked the spirits of the island for safe passage and for their permission to be there on that island. And, he left something of value to him there at that site as just an offering of himself to that greater purpose. And so I did something similar. I had a rock that I brought from the Yuba River. It was this granite rock of where I would go to just recharge. And I left that rock there, and I just kind of waited, and I knew that something would show up if something was supposed to show up. And as I was leaving, I stopped walking, and I just had this message that I didn't hear. And I know you've talked about it, and a lot of people have talked about it. You don't hear it audibly, but you hear it through your heart. And it said, your heart will be tested. And I mean, I got that like the day before I was supposed to race. So I said, what does this mean? This is scary, you know, like my heart's going to explode. I'm going to have to run this far.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like a very comforting message. Like, oh dear, what does this mean?
I essentially said, okay, this is going to be really, really hard. And I already knew it was going to be really hard. So, okay. So I just said, okay, mind, we can stop trying to outthink this. And I said, okay, I will take the test. I will be there. And sure enough, you know, like I started out, great race. You know, I was swimming, swim was beautiful. I'm looking at the fish and turtles below, and it's the best place to have a triathlon. The bike was great, really windy, really, really hot. But I got to the run, and you know, the heat and the humidity of the tropics there really set in. And the thing about Kona is when you're running in the city of around Kailua Kona, you got plenty of people cheering, you know, loud music, people spraying you with hoses and encouraging you with signs and cowbells and everything. But then you leave and you head out along the Queen K highway. And for me, at that part of the day, it starts to get dark. And I thought I had really dealt with all the trauma from combat. And as the sky became dark, I went into a dark place spiritually, and I just started rehashing and remembering all these like intrusive thoughts just showed up of my friends being killed and being able to do nothing about it. And just this feeling of like helplessness and hopelessness, just almost complete nihilism was showing up. And it's like, it's just chaos. It's just chaos and shit and death. And there's nothing good. And I was trying to resist feeling that. And the more I knew essentially that the more I try to resist, the worse and the more it hangs on. And so I said, okay, that's fine. I'm willing to be here wherever this is. And I'm not going to try to resist anymore. I surrender to whatever this is. And I surrendered to that. And I surrendered to, I wasn't going to resist trying to be uncomfortable. I was like, this is fine. I can hurt. And as soon as I noticed that I was okay with hurting, I was okay with physical pain and spiritual pain and mental pain. I had this thought, I was like, oh, well, my legs really hurt. And then I thought, well, yeah, my legs hurt. That means I have legs, and that means I'm alive. And then all of a sudden, it still was really, really hard and painful. But I said, this is fine. I don't need things to be perfect. I don't need things to be perfect at all. I'm willing to have this because I have a source of joy that doesn't depend on circumstance at all. And so I ran with that, and I said, oh, just take a few more steps. Just keep going. Just keep going. And I let go of thinking of the finish line. And I just said, be here right now, be here right now in every single step. And I did. And I was with that pain and with that experience and everything else wonderful that was happening along that road. And eventually I took enough steps to where I got to the finish line, and I completed the biggest race in my life up to that point. And I got to carry the Marine Corps flag across the finish line. And it was another test, and it was just another test I passed along the way of being willing, just being willing and following my heart, that it would guide me the right way. And my mind couldn't understand, but I said, that's okay. And it's led to even more things that are even more fun now that I'm doing with the race and connecting with some of these Gold Star families.
That's beautiful. Oh my gosh. And that's what I love about your story, is that by you basically tapping into that, knowing that there's something bigger than you out there without needing a full explanation, it just keeps taking you to these amazing new places that, like you said, you never would have thought you would have been doing the triathlon in Kona, Hawaii, you know, the biggest sports event in that field, you know. I mean, and that's the same thing with me. I mean, me coming to Hawaii, it's me just following my heart and surrendering. Yes. No matter how difficult it is. I mean, I I had to leave my marriage to follow my heart. And it was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but it just keeps unfolding. And what you just said is Be Here Now. That's Ram Dass's book,
Yeah.
who I hang out with. And in fact,
Yes.
I skipped swimming with him this morning to hang out with you. So.
Wow. I'm honored because he's been on my mind a lot since I've been diving into his work, and
Yeah, he's amazing.
Beautiful soul.
And I feel so blessed that when I moved here, I didn't know he was even on island, and then somehow our paths just keep continuing to cross. And so those are, yeah, I know, right? And those are some of the blessings that keep coming my way that are just so unexpected and so out of the ordinary. And I think I mentioned it at some point, but for another one, which is just kind of crazy and funny, but I'd had this premonition that I was going to connect with Jim Carrey. This was years ago. And then when I moved here, I was just sitting on my couch and I literally got that knowing, like you got the message, your heart will be tested. Mine was go to the beach now. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I didn't know what I was doing, but I got to the beach and there's Jim Carrey. And I had no idea that his house is literally less than a quarter mile from where I live. And
wow.
So anyway, it's just so funny and fun how the universe just unfolds these amazing opportunities for us when we're willing and open to receive them. I think that's when you're in those dark places, as much as spirit or universe wants to connect with us, if we can't do it, it can only come so far. Don't you think?
That's so true. And I really connected with one of your guests. I think her name was Ingrid from Colombia.
Yes.
She talked about the necessity for her to have that suffering, just to know. And had I not walked in the darkness like I did, I would not have this profound appreciation for the light. I don't know if that's true for everybody, but for me, it's been true. I need to stick my finger in the light socket to know it shocks. So, yes.
I love that. That's just, I agree. I think you really, you can't appreciate the light without the dark, and it's that contrast that keeps us moving forward. And again, it's like, if we did know the answer to why we were here or what our life's purpose is, or, how it's all going to unfold, well, then what's the point? Right. I mean,
that's the point. Yeah. The mystery is the great part, the mystery and just the joy of being with that. And then discovering, oh, this is my next step. Oh, yes. Right. And I know that part of that, like Gold Star mothers and Gold Star families are a big part of my life now. And for people who don't know,
I was just going to say, tell us what a Gold Star family is, because I'm not familiar with that term.
It goes back to either World War I think, or World War II. And when families would have sons, most cases sons and daughters deploy, they would have a blue star that would hang in their window. And that meant they had someone who was serving in a war in their family. And then if you saw a gold star hanging, that meant that their son or daughter had been killed in that war. And so I have been in contact with a lot of Gold Star families, and many of the parents and family members, sisters and brothers and aunts and uncles and everything, and spouses of guys in my unit who were killed. And for a while I couldn't, just because of the survivor's guilt and the fear. And then I've been connected to a lot of them here in California. And there's something that happens when a family loses someone, becomes a Gold Star family, and they'll get a lot of support initially for the funeral, and a lot of the community will show up. And then after that, it's almost like that compassion is kind of exhausted itself, and the family, so many people I talk to, all the mothers will generally tell me that afterwards the community will, and friends of theirs will start kind of avoiding them because they're so uncomfortable and they don't know what to say. They just, I was talking to a Gold Star mother on Friday, and just one of these, of course, not random coincidences. And she was the one who put the seed in my heart years ago by saying that I walked through a store and one of my friends that I knew made eye contact and then turned away and walked out. And it's just, so these Gold Star families are losing not only their son or daughter, and all the vets in that unit who might be feeling too unworthy to talk to them. So they've lost their family, they lost their son or daughter, they've lost their son or daughter's friends and and coworkers, and then they've lost their community. And so they become isolated a lot of times. And so I started thinking, okay, well, we have veterans who are isolated from the Gold Star families in the community because they can't feel connected. We have Gold Star families feeling that same thing. And then the community, I talked to so many people, are saying, how do we help people come back? And we all want to connect, but everyone's too afraid to do it. And that fear, people don't even know the fear. They just know it's uncomfortable and push away, right? Yeah. And so I said, well, life's too short for this. There's so many cool things happening in life for us to just ignore each other and stay isolated. No way, this is crap. And so I said, what can we do? What can I do now to honor the living and honor the people that are here? And so I decided that this past spring in May, I was doing Ironman Santa Rosa again. And I thought, well, what if I dedicated this race to, Gold Star family here? And then I thought, okay, yeah, I can do that, but in what way? And I said, it kind of popped in my mind, and Ironman was asking me, because I was the ambassador for that race. And I said, I'm gonna carry the American flag for the entire marathon. And they just said, are you sure? I said, yes. I said halfway sure, yes, I'm going to do it, because I knew, like, once I got out there, even like I knew it could be painful and it'd be even harder than just running a regular Ironman. But I said, you know what, once I've connected to the why, the how is only a logistical issue. The how doesn't really matter. And when I connected to the purpose, I was like, I know I'm going to do it, and it might hurt, but then I know I find good things when I hurt. Right. And so I did that, and I connected with this Gold Star mom, Linda Kynock. And what really got me about that was Joshua Kynock, who was killed in Iraq in 2005. Just before that, he was on home for leave, and he got to meet his newborn daughter, who was there for the birth. And he got to see his daughter be born and spend a couple of days with her. Then he came back to Iraq and returned there and was killed shortly after. And something about just a daughter and her father, and that connection that in some ways was severed, just got me in the heart. And I said, this is it right here. And so we connected there. And so they got to come to the race, and Ironman got them VIP tickets and everything. And I carried the flag for Linda and then Josh's daughter, Savannah, who were both there. And they got to spend time with my family and feel connected to the community again. And I got to do healing too. And I got to see other vets say, oh, we can talk to them. I was like, yes, they want you to. They desperately want you to. And the community could say, oh, these are ways I can help, veterans and Gold Star families. And again, both of us were saying resounding yes, of course. And so I don't know what's going to become of this, but I do know that Ironman took me up on a challenge I made them to make this a national campaign. And so we're going to do this all around the country now, and find a veteran who can carry a flag for a half Ironman or an Ironman in the United States for a local Gold Star family. And this is so fun that I don't know if I'll ever run a race again without carrying a flag for them. Because this is way more fun for me. I love it.
Right. Well, it ups your game, so to speak, by, and logistically you were able to figure out how to, so is it running with it, or when you're swimming too, or on the bike? I mean,
I haven't figured out a way to swim with it. Yeah. I have a family. So when I finish the bike ride, I park my bike, and then there's the transition zone, and transitions, such an important part of my life. And so I'm running out of the transition zone from the bike to the run, and the family, I asked them, I say, I would like you to hand me the flag as just a symbol of your trust for me to hold the honor of your loved one here, and their permission for me to be part of their life. And it's a sacred thing.
It is. My gosh, I'm welling up with tears just hearing it. It's so beautiful.
And they hand me the flag.
It's like you're running with their loved one,
Yes.
Yeah, it's so beautiful.
And like I tell them, I was like, they are not gone. They are not dead. They're still alive. And
absolutely.
And I don't try to push any belief on anyone. I just share what it's done for me and
Mm-hmm.
my own experiences, and just kind of like be that lighthouse. If people see it, they can come to it. You know, I'm not here to evangelize or convince anyone. I'm just here to offer, you know, love and hope.
That's beautiful.
I come to the finish line, and then I hand them the flag, and it's an experience that it just continues to open my heart, and so it's been something that I've seen other veterans now are asking me, like, how can I be a part of this? And I see it as this big healing movement in the country, for veterans, for families that are hurting, and this is where it starts, but it's not just a veteran specific thing. This is for everybody who can learn to find a different relationship with loss and with pain, and be able to understand that they can feel all their feelings, and they can break through those and tap into the joy. I was like, once you experience, there's no going back.
That's
There's
right.
no going back.
That's right. Well, and I love that, because I had a very similar situation after my husband died. I'd be in the grocery store, and, you know, people, you could see them, they'd see me and they'd turn their cart the other way and walk away. They felt so uncomfortable. They didn't want to approach me. They didn't know what to say. And I did a podcast actually on stop saying I'm sorry when somebody,
I love that one. Yes.
you know, yeah, when somebody, somebody dies, and then it's like everyone's like, oh, I'm so sorry for your loss, and it's like, no, let's like be real about what's happening here. Let's talk about, like, tell me something you remember about my husband, or, you know, or about this military person that passed away. Like, let's talk about them. Let's not pretend like they just disappeared, and you know, and all of us feel awkward and weird around each other. And
yeah, that's exactly it. And that's exactly, like, being in tune kind of with the energy of that moment, and
right,
being willing to be there for them.
That's right. So, well, I would love to be in the moment and pull a few cards for you. What do you think about that?
I love it. Yes.
Okay, let's see what the universe has to say about just this whole conversation. I think it's just fascinating, and I love how you're helping heal literally the nation by the work you're doing, and how it's coming. So, well, the first card is compassion, and typically the first card is the blockage card. But so what I'm seeing there, you know, even as far as you've come, there's still so much more compassion that for yourself, and, you know, and for others, and just because it's those self seeds of doubt, right, that are always kind of plaguing that analytical mind. I mean, you being a Marine and a military man, and as I was saying, that, you know, me being a former CPA, there's still this mind game that we play with ourselves, you know, that we're always still kind of discounting. So anyway, the first card is just about having compassion for yourself.
Oh, and that comes up so much when there's compassion fatigue. You know, you hear so many stories of death and destruction. My job is as a therapist is to hear people's worst day in combat. And it's, so eventually when I hear that, then, you know, it can be easy to shut off and not want to take on that pain.
Absolutely. Well, I love it, because guess what your action card is? Surrender. Oh, we have a special guest here.
Yes, this is the daughter I was telling you about.
Oh, hi.
Connected me right back to source, that I told her that I had dreams of before you were born. So.
I love it. No, that's great. Well, so your action card is surrender, which I love. And in fact, your daughter, you know, right there is at perfect timing, because that's really what you did, is she was your inspiration. You know, she's the one that kept you coming back, and knowing that there was that deep well of joy that's available to you. So surrendering. And then, oh, I love it, your outcome card is leadership. And I feel like this is just confirmation of everything you're doing. You know, it was that originally that compassion that you couldn't find for yourself, but you did. And then, you know, surrendering into just letting universe show you the next steps. And now here you are leading, you know, Ironman triathletes on, you know, triathlons on all of this.
And all of these have they've hit me in the heart, and it's just yes, without a doubt. There's no ambiguity about any of this, because the compassion, yes, that's it's been a blockage, and I know I need to keep surrendering. And I've found this, this week when my dog died, and I had to put him to sleep, and my little girl was there for it too.
Oh.
It was sad, but surrendering to that completely, and whatever the path is. And then leadership, I was talking to another friend who's had that kind of connection to source, and she's saying, you need to dream bigger. And, and I know that I've been selling myself short and what I can do. And I think my position is a temporary one. And I think there's something bigger, and I'm just doing my work to be ready for when that's there. So this is so cool.
That's awesome. Well, I told everything you said there, I've got chills on my arms, which is absolute truth that you're speaking. So I agree. You've got a much bigger, it's endless. That's the most amazing part, is truly we can create anything that we want. It's just a matter of thinking it and going out and taking your next step toward it.
I love it. Yes.
That's wonderful. Well, good. Well, I know we've got all your links we'll have on the website, but is there any specific link or anything you want to tell our listeners how they can get in touch with you, or what you'd like to share with them?
One thing I want everybody to have, and it's written for veterans, but it applies to everyone, and it's called, it's a short ebook. Yeah, sweetie, hello. Almost done. It's a short ebook I wrote called Mind, Body, and Spirit, and how to reconnect to that. And it's just practical ways to do it, because this can get so, abstract and so removed from actually what can we do, is that I was like, let's make a short, simple way to reconnect to your body, to your mind, to your spirit and purpose. And so that I'd love everybody to check that out. And it's free.
Great.
It's free. Everyone can have it who wants it. And just the other thing, if they want to see, is that there's that Facebook video I showed you of being able to run with a flag and see what it does for these families. And so that's there too.
Wonderful. Well, that is fantastic. Well, Mike, thank you so much for your time today. I love your story, and especially hearing from somebody in the military, like you said, I mean, Marines they're not supposed to have feelings and,
yeah, exactly.
and be able to talk about this, but I feel like you're such an amazing leader, and I'm thrilled that you're out there speaking about this and allowing others to know that it's okay to open up and to feel this. So thank you.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you for inspiring us all with your podcast and all your work. It's so cool to connect to you. I really love this.
Great. Well, thank you. Well, thank you also for listening in to another episode of Exploring Death, and until next time, aloha. Thank you for listening to the Exploring Death podcast. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Before you make any financial or legal decisions, consult a professional. This show is copyrighted by Exploring Death. Written permission must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting.